10 designer fragrances that you need to try. That's what I'm going to be talking about in this video. I have 10 great smelling designer fragrances that are creative and very well made and definitely are worth checking out. What's going on YouTube? Raj here. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for stopping by. I really do appreciate that. I hope all of you out there are doing well. So in this video, I'm going to be highlighting some designer fragrances that I either own now or I have owned in the past that I really think are worth checking out. Some of you may have noticed recently that I've been looking back at fragrances that I used to own and kind of getting some good ideas for future content. So I'm not saying that these are the 10 best designer fragrances of all time, but these are just some that I wanted to highlight in this video. So let's crack on with the first brand, which is Tom Ford. Tom Ford is one of my favorite fragrance houses, whether it be their signature line or whether it be the private blend. There is something in there for the fragrance enthusiast, and there's something also in there I think for people who are more casual about fragrances. The thing with Tom Ford is that they do charge a little bit more, so there's that to consider, but you do get a lot of quality. So the first fragrance to mention is Black Orchid. Black Orchid is one of those fragrances that I used to wear with Oud Wood, which is from the Private Blend collection. And what I did, and I have a video on this by the way, so I'll leave a link in the description box and in the I section or the button in the top right hand corner of this, so click on that if you want to check it out. So yeah, I reviewed those fragrances together and I mentioned that I like to wear them together, not layered, but what I did is that I would do, say, a spray of Black Orchid here and here and a spray of Oud Wood here and here, so creating this kind of like this X, and it created this unbelievable aroma. Black Orchid for me had a tropical floral feel. It felt very earthy, very green. It was a little bit heavy. I liked that sort of density in the fragrance, and it had also a kind of dark chocolatey vibe there. Very, very luxurious. Black Orchid was a fragrance that I discovered quite early on in my fragrance journey, and I remember exactly where I was. I was in Dublin in Ireland, and I was in a department store which I can't remember the name of, but it's like a luxury department store, and I was in the men's section looking at clothes I couldn't afford, and then I saw the fragrance, I saw a shelf of fragrances, went over, saw Black Orchid there and thought, oh, okay, it was a men's fragrance, thought nothing of it, wore it and was like blown away. I remember after trying it, I was sitting in a cafe, had a coffee, and I was just like in a little trance, I was in this bubble of Black Orchid that smelled amazing. Black Orchid is heavily marketed towards women, but for me, I 100% think that a man could pull this one off. It's a beautiful fragrance. The next fragrance to talk about is Noir Extreme. Noir Extreme is a fragrance I would definitely bring it back into my collection. To be honest, I'm actually looking to build up my Tom Ford collection. Again, I have a handful at the moment, but yeah, I would like to bring back a few more. And I really liked the sweet gourmand aspects of Noir Extreme. It's supposed to smell of kulfi, which is an Indian dessert. I kind of got that vibe. I wouldn't say they like nailed it. Kulfi comes in many flavors, so I think maybe they were going for a pistachio kind of flavored one, but I don't know. It was an interesting novel ingredient. Or an accord, and they combined it really nicely with saffron, so I like that spicy, milky, gourmand, nutty aspect to this fragrance. Very, very delicious. Reminded me in some ways of Dolce & Gabbana The One in terms of that style, that kind of sweet ambery style. Really delicious fragrance, definitely worth checking out. The next fragrance to talk about is the fragrance that I've recently reviewed. I will leave the link down below, and it is Ombré Leather. This is basically a softer version of Tuscan Leather from the Private Blend, and I actually much prefer this version. I love, like, there's a touch of sweetness in here, There's an earthiness. The leather is noticeable. It is still quite a bold fragrance, but I think so luxurious, so dense. And you can watch my review to find out, you know, exactly everything I have to say. But this is certainly a fragrance with a lot of character, and yeah, I absolutely love it. It's quite a bold scent. It's a very masculine scent. But I think a woman could pull this off, actually. Even though I do think it leans more on the masculine side, I definitely think a woman could pull this off. It would be quite interesting, actually, to smell this fragrance on a woman. And this is, for me, Tom Ford style. You know, he does the darker scents a lot better, I think. The fresh ones are also really, really good, like Neroli Portofino. But I think Tom Ford is at his best when he is doing this noir style. You know, that's really where he shines. The next brand to talk about is Dior, and I'm going to start with Dior Homme Intense. This was a fragrance for me that was love at first sniff. I've pretty much had this fragrance in my collection ever since I really got into fragrances. There was a period when I sold the old 50 ml bottle that I had because I wanted to upgrade to a larger size. But yeah, pretty much it's always been in my collection, and I really cherish and respect this fragrance massively. It's very unique in the men's designer line. I love the chalkiness, the powdery iris, the cocoa powder. There's a touch of lavender. I'm pretty sure there's a touch of lavender in the scent as well. And the Dior Homme line, actually as a whole, is really, really worth checking out. I love what they've done. It's a little bit sweet, this fragrance, but it's also got a woodiness to it, which I really appreciate. And yeah, it's just really, really well made. The next fragrance to talk about is Dior Homme Parfum. This is a really beautiful fragrance, very dense, very heavy. You've got to like that more potent style of fragrance, I think, to appreciate this one. They have added a leather note in here, which I think is really beautiful. There's a smoky quality to this one, a woodiness, a boozy quality, I would say. And yeah, again, it is really, really unique, I would say. Not just in Dior's whole lineup of fragrances, but the wider market. You know, all fragrances, if you take them all into consideration, Dior Homme Parfum is quite unique to me. Really, really well made, classy stuff, worth checking out. The next fragrance to talk about from Dior is Fahrenheit Parfum. This was, for me, a really, really welcome addition to the Fahrenheit line. The original Fahrenheit it's a classic. It's really, really well made. Very interesting, very unique, but I found it a little bit too, just a little bit too aggressive for my personal taste. The Parfum version, like Dior Homme Parfum, adds a leather note. There's a boozy quality. There is this very deep, sweet vanilla note, which adds just a whole rounds off the fragrance, or creates a more approachable style, shall we say. Very unique fragrance, very, very well made, Dior quality, and definitely worth checking out. It's time to talk about Hermes, and the first one to mention is Terre, the Parfum version. So I owned the Parfum version, and I know that this video is just 10 designer fragrances, but I'm going to throw in a couple extra. The Eau Très Fraîche version, the Vetiver version of this, and the EDT are all worth checking out. This is a really, really solid line. Terre Parfum was a fragrance that when I owned it, I used to wear it a lot to work. It felt like a perfect office fragrance, very professional, very well put together. And I remember smelling this in one of my old workplaces when somebody walked into the lift, and I smelled it on them, and it was unmistakable. It had to be Terre d'Hermes, and it really clicked at that moment. You know, sometimes that happens when you smell fragrances on other people. It clicked for me that this is that suit and tie, professional setting, formal occasion fragrance, and it just works really well in that environment. You can wear it in other occasions casually as well, but I think in that type of scenario, Terre d'Hermes, the Parfum version I'm talking about, works really, really well. The next one is maybe not a fragrance that you would want to spray on too heavily when going to the office. I think you can still wear it, but it's definitely more bolder, and this one is Bel Ami. Bel Ami is like a really beautiful leather and spice fragrance. It has a strong character. It may not be for everyone because of how bold it is, but yeah, I would definitely bring it back into my collection. I thought Bel Ami was superb. I love the spiciness in here, the cardamom, the clove, mixed in with that beautiful leather note. It has to go down as a classic. And what I really like about Bel Ami and Hermes fragrance as a whole is that even though they are not cheap, they're not crazy expensive. You know, I think 100 ml can be had for, I think retail price is around £90, but this pops up on discounters. So does Terre quite a lot. So you can have a really interesting fragrance for a decent price, which is always a great combination. Okay, so moving on to the next house, and I've got one fragrance from Chanel, a very unique offering from the house. Really, really well made. One of my favorites. It is Egoiste. Egoiste, which I believe means selfish or something along those lines, is a wonderful fragrance and stands out quite a lot when you compare it to other Chanel fragrances. Chanel, I think, do a good job when it comes to their mainstream releases. Bleu de Chanel, I think, is a solid fragrance. The flanker to this, Platinum Egoiste, is good, but I don't think it's anywhere near as good as this one. And the Allure line, I think there are a couple of good ones in there, a few which I think are okay. But for me, this is the one that stands out the most. There's a wonderful carnation note in here, that sandalwood vibe, woody, floral, spicy, very, very beautiful fragrance. It has a lot of character, it's quite a distinguished fragrance. I'm not sure if Egoiste is going to be for everyone. It's not crazy, but it's not a mass appealing fragrance at the same time. It's one of those that I think is worth testing first. I hope don't go out and blind buy. In fact, blind buying on the whole is not really a great idea, I think. I know some people love doing it, but for me, you know, definitely get to a Chanel counter when we all can and try this one out. It's maybe a little bit in the shadows of the Allure line and the Bleu de Chanel line, but this is a must try. Next up is a fragrance from Valentino, and this one is Uomo, but I'm also going to add in Uomo Intense also. I mentioned Uomo Intense because that's actually the one I prefer, but I've never owned it. I owned Uomo, and they're both excellent fragrances. I think they're both worth checking out. The original Uomo has similarities, yes, to Dior Homme, but it's still very, very, very well made and does something a little bit different to Dior Homme. It does have that sort of gourmandish feel to it, which I really appreciate. And the Uomo Intense goes off in a slightly more, slightly different way. It's a spicier, a bit more woody. Both are really, really well made fragrances, and I would highly recommend these two from Valentino. I think those two are a lot better than the Aqua version. I have never been a fan of the Aqua version, to be honest, and I like the more slightly heavier stuff. You might have noticed that from this list. There are no freshies in this list. That's not to say that there are no great designer fresh fragrances, but these are just the ones I wanted to highlight at this moment in time. Guys, let me know what you think. What do you think about these fragrances? Do you love them? Do you think they're okay? Or do you absolutely hate them? I don't mind you telling me whatever is on your mind. And hopefully this video can act as a really helpful guide to maybe some newbies coming into the game, or maybe people who have been into fragrances for a while but maybe have overlooked some of these fragrances. If you like this type of content, hit the like button and consider subscribing. I've got plenty more content coming up. I'm trying to be consistent. I hope you guys have noticed that over the past few months. I've been more consistent than I've ever been, to be honest. And yeah, that's it. I appreciate your support. Take care, everyone. I'll see you on the next video. Bye.